Welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. I'm Jess or Jessie Corinne.
And my name is Mark, and I go by Mark Your Pages. And today's episode, my friend, is going to be a fun one because today we're going to be talking about when it's time to switch your planner, when it's not quite working out for you anymore. But before we get into that topic today, just want to thank everyone so much for the comments on the last video, getting those on Spotify, getting those on YouTube and other places where you're listening or watching this podcast are fantastic. And I know I say it every time, Jess, but it's such a plethora of knowledge. It's so awesome to hear from Planner Pals every single episode. So just want to say thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. It's a fun conversation.
The opportunity to have the back and forth with the community is something I very much value about the community in general. So as always, thank you for leaving us your thoughts and feels, and make sure that you do at the end of this one, because in talking about like when it's time to switch planners and such, I feel like this is a really big pain point for a lot of people. You know, you're kind of slogging through it like, oh, is this working? Isn't it working? Like, should I try something new? Do I just need to kind of like grin and bear it? I find that it's the decision making, right? The decision making part is the painful part. Once you've made the decision, it's not so bad, like with most things, but that kind of like lead up to making the choice is tricky.
I think it's because we value everything we've put into that type of planner, because a lot of the times when you are thinking about starting a new planner and actually starting in it, a lot of the times you've already put all this mental thought and everything into it before you even start. You've researched it. If it's a certain notebook or planner or something like that, you have so much energy in it. You really, really, really want it to work. And I think that's exactly it. You're just, okay, I'm going to use this. And then you start using it. And then there's just a point where you're like, and maybe you've been there before, and that's what we're going to cover today, are some of those topics. I'll kick off just because I think the biggest kind of red flag for me when it comes to planners or notebooks, especially, is that I just don't open it anymore. It's just one of those things where I just am so disgusted by it, or I'm just so unhappy with it. It's like open it up just doesn't give me joy. It's like, oh God, I've got to open this up and I'm going to kind of slog through it just because I've invested money into it. A lot of the times for me, it's especially when like the paper isn't papering the right way. It's not working with the materials that I'm using. It's bleeding through or it's ghosting too much. And it's just really just, I don't want to even look at it. And for me, that's like a really big red flag for me in the past that I've had to come to understand and say, Mark, if you're not going to use it, it's not worth it. So like, let's just move on.
I think it's very much that kind of like sunk cost fallacy, like whether it's the literal like money in terms of cost, or if it's the time cost, energy cost, or something that you've already put into a system that you're working with. So you kind of feel like you're doing yourself a disservice, or like you've wasted something by moving away from it. So you kind of tell yourself like, okay, we're just going to keep using it. We're just going to keep going with it. But then you don't. Like you say you're going to keep using it, but then it just sits there neglected on your desk. It's not doing what you wanted it to do for you. It's not helping you organize your life or record your thoughts or anything like that. And it's really just sitting there reminding you to feel guilty about the fact that you wasted those resources. It's not a good feeling.
And something I will do, and I don't even realize that I do it, sometimes I'll start to like store it away or put it away. And it's kind of that out of sight, out of mind, which makes it even worse because then it's just like, well, I really am not reminded that I'm supposed to be using this thing. It's not even an effort because I've completely just cleared it off my desk or put it away. It's never a good thing when that happens.
When you do kind of like buckle down and say like, no, actually, we're going to do the thing. We're going to get in and use it. And then using it is just like soul sucking. It's just not a joy at all. And it feels like you're kind of making it a chore for yourself, or you're forcing yourself to use it. Especially like you kind of mentioned with the idea of, I don't like the paper, or I don't like the layout or the structure or something like that. But making, or I guess forcing yourself to fit into the system rather than having a system that actually works for you, it just sucks all the fun out of it. And one of the things I love about journaling and planning is that it is fun. So if it's not fun anymore, then that's a pretty big red flag that maybe it's time to make a switch.
Yeah, that's like a life thing. I say that to myself and other people, especially with work or certain situations. If you're really not loving it anymore, if you get up out of bed, not that I think about my journal when I get up out of bed, but in this situation, like if you get up out of bed and you don't like your job, I think it might be time to move along, especially if it's like, okay, I had a bad day, one thing, but if you just really don't like what you're doing, like you said, it's hard to just get to that point to make that decision. Again, it's much different a change from a job than a notebook or a planner. But the idea is still there, is that you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm really not loving this. Something about this just isn't really right. Let me go ahead and look for maybe the next thing that will. I'll keep that while I'm doing those other things and like eventually get into it. But it just, ugh, it's just not a good feeling.
I love that idea of, oh yeah, no, your journal plan is separate to your job. I'm like, is it? Is it supposed? It's supposed to be separate? Where did I go wrong? Like, you don't get out of bed and just start think about journaling.
I guess it's a little bit different when your full time job is journaling and making content and doing stuff like that. It's like, well, what am I doing today? Whereas, like most other people, if they're not, I mean, everyone's a bit different. Who knows? I'm not going to get myself in trouble and make it sound like anyone who does think about the journal when they wake up is wrong. It's hardly a very good practice. That's usually just not my number one thing.
I mean, if you're getting up and your first thought is you're journaling, you want to make sure it's a good thought, though. You want to make sure it's a positive thing. Like, whether it's your job or your journal or any other life area, we want to make sure that it sparks joy. Otherwise, you will not get out of bed, you will procrastinate starting on your day, and then even more things won't happen, which isn't a great spot to be in.
No, it's definitely not. Well, what about yourself, Jess? Anything that has popped up in your life where you've just really felt like, you know what, this is another flag. It's time to cut it.
I think that one thing that has popped up, which is not necessarily a red flag for like the entire planner needs to switch, but maybe like something needs to change, is when there are particular layouts or structures or parts that are just going untouched. Like, I'm not getting in and filling in. Trackers are always a big one. Routine trackers, habit trackers, in particular styles or structures. Jess will not check in with that. Sorry, annual tracker. It just wasn't meant to be. Sorry, monthly tracker. It's not my happy place. But those are also really good indicators that something isn't working for us and maybe we need to switch something up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think trackers are the number one thing. We always joke about that when we talk about like unused pages and some of those past episodes. They always have the best intentions, but something that you and I have mentioned a lot is that idea of it being like performative instead of it being something that you're really using. Like the idea of filling out a tracker is great. I think that's why we all love them so much. It really does make you feel as if you've accomplished something. But when you don't fill out those trackers, it's like, well, maybe I did do the thing, but I just not filling it out. And you're kind of in this weird kind of spot. The hard part, like your journal shouldn't feel like a job, but to a certain extent, it kind of should. It's something that you should be responsible for. It is something that you should certainly keep on top of, but it is just, it should never feel hard, sometimes more difficult, especially when you're making difficult decisions. And that is just something that is just, it's just not a, like you said before, it's like, it's not a good feeling when you're not filling out those trackers, but you're 100% right. I feel like those are always the first ones where we're like, not going to be doing that next month. That did not work out very well.
The number of times I bring one in for the month being like, yep, this is the month that this tracker will work for me. And then we get to the next month, I'm like, haha, psych, nope. But I kind of like what you said there, is that idea of it shouldn't feel like a job to get into your journal, unless journaling is your job. That's a different thing. But like, it shouldn't feel like a giant chore. Or if it does feel a little bit like a chore, there should be enough of a payoff that makes it worthwhile. Like, I don't enjoy cleaning my kitchen, but I love the outcome of a clean kitchen. I might not necessarily love filling in my tracker, but if I feel like I'm actually getting information out of it, or I'm feeling genuinely accomplished by doing that, then there is going to be some kind of like payoff there that makes the effort put in worth putting the effort in. If there is no kind of payoff, or if the payoff isn't sufficient enough, it's not significant enough to really account for the fact that you've put that time, effort, and energy, then that will also be kind of a red flag to say like, maybe something's not working. Maybe we need to change something up.
Yeah, there's something that I made a spread a long time ago, and I don't know if I came up with this or like, someone probably said it, but I used to say this a lot, is like, your journal needs to work for you. You don't need to work for your journal. Like that idea that like whatever you're putting in there, your planner, your bullet journal, whatever that might be, it needs to work for yourself. It needs to work for your life. It's supposed to make your life easier. But when it turns on you and then you feel like you're dedicating too much time to it, you're kind of putting and pouring all that energy into something that you're not getting anything back. That for me is like a really important factor to just be like, this isn't right. This isn't working. Something is off with this balance here. And usually for me, that's when I say, okay, a reset button. That might just be turning the page and rethinking about the ways in which I want to tackle that journal. Since for me, I'm using blank journals and I'm kind of filling them in myself. But I think even with like another type of planner, right? Maybe your inserts just aren't right. Maybe the way that you've kind of put those or curated those together, like something's just not vibing the right way. So for me, a lot of the times that's when I'm just like, yep, not good. It's time to really make a change.
Yeah, I think that that part about the inserts in particular, one of the things that you can kind of use to indicate that something isn't quite right is like, is the information where I would think to find that information? Like, is it put in the spot in my journal or planner system or whatever where I would actually naturally tend to go looking for that thing? So, for instance, for me, I will tend to look for any kind of like event that is scheduled or like time sensitive. My default is like, I should check my calendar, not I should check my journal. So, if I'm trying to like make myself use my journal for those types of pieces of information, when realistically that's not where I'm going to check for them, that is also another red flag for me.
Yeah, it's something that I've had to change up over time since, I'm utilizing the bullet journal method, and I have specific collection pages for certain meetings and things. The idea there was always to rapid log in that collection page, right? All the information that you have should go there. The problem that I've had in the past and I've had to change is that I used to just rapid log, let's say like a meeting collection page, for instance, and I used to jot down notes and to-dos. I used to keep them there, but the problem is that that's not the page that I am typically always looking at. So what I started to do is almost kind of migrate them into my weekly view, because I know that I wasn't going to look back there on the page. It still stayed there because it's still information about that. But a lot of times, like right after that meeting, I would just put like a forward facing, arrow and just say like, I migrated that to where I am right now, just to let myself know that I didn't miss it. And that was something that I had to change, just because, to your exact point, the information and the to-dos weren't where I thought they needed to be. I mean, in theory, it makes sense that they're on the collection page because that's where I'm taking those notes. But like the actual to-dos that I'm looking at every single day are not there. And since collection pages could be anywhere in your notebook, it's also difficult to try to find those and come back to them. At least how I'm utilizing the system. Like maybe I'm doing it wrong. Who the hell knows nowadays? Anyone can tell you you're bullet journaling wrong, Jess.
Don't even bait me. Oh my gosh. But I think it is a very like it's an ADHD friendly thing to put things at like the point of performance, I think it's called. So it's like, where am I actually going to best use this? Let's put it there because then it'll actually work better. But in terms of things that also indicate like, hey, maybe this isn't working, one of the biggest ones is just not getting stuff done. Because I use my journal and planning system, funnily enough, for planning, like trying to organize my life and stuff. If I find that I am forgetting when I need to be places, where I need to be with places, and like what I need to be doing, when things need to be done by, all of that kind of stuff, when I start finding like, oh, cool, I'm working up towards like a lot of deadlines and I'm like trying to get things done 5 minutes before the thing is due or whatever, then that is a really good indicator to me that like something in my system is not working. Even though it's not necessarily like I'm looking at my planner and saying like, okay, there's something wrong with my planner. It's more so like the reflection of those plans or the execution of those plans is kind of indicating something isn't working because you're not getting things done in a timely manner.
It's something that's been big for me. When I first started bullet journaling, I thought everything had to live inside of there. And so I was like, okay, every event, everything gets put inside of there. And I wasn't putting it in other places because in my mind, I felt like it only could go in my planner. And something that I realized obviously is that wasn't working because I was missing dates and forgetting. And I don't carry my journal with me everywhere, especially if you've got like a B5 or a square. Like that's not like going in your backpack, or I don't carry a purse or a man bag or anything like that. So like it's not with me. And so something I've been doing a lot is just duplicating that data in my phone. So it's like I'll write down that note. I'll remind myself. I'll go in a future log, or even if it's an appointment for later on in the week, but I always put it inside of my phone because then I can easily find the address, put it into the meeting invite. And again, I can put all the information in my bullet journal, but again, I don't have that with me. So if I don't remember to take it or look at it beforehand or write it down, and then also to me, honestly, feels like old school, like printing out your MapQuest directions, like that's, I don't know, for some reason, like writing down on paper and then being like, here's where I have to go. And then realizing I'm still going to put that in my phone's GPS to find out where that is. It just didn't feel right to me. So that's why I started to do that. So it's like the journal is there to collect it. It's there to remind me, but the actual action of going and doing that appointment or whatever lives on my phone. And that's been like a really big like awakening for me, where it's like, it's not that the bullet journal isn't working for me. I just had to find a better way to kind of do it.
I think that's also a good part. It's like you kind of said, the bullet journal isn't like not working for me or whatever. English is not my first language. That is a bold-faced lie. It is. I just suck at it anyway.
I was gonna say, what is your first language if it's not?
Obviously, my first language is Australian.
Gosh, yes, true, true. You do say some words a bit differently.
I do, I do. But in terms of thinking about like, is it the fact that the whole thing isn't working, or is just maybe part of it not working? So it's like, do we have to throw baby out with the bathwater, or do we maybe just need to change the bathwater? This is a bad analogy. Don't throw babies. Anyway, but in terms of thinking about that, like, there might be parts of your system that actually do work really well for you, but if you have that kind of tainted view or like twisted perception of it almost because there are particular parts that are just really problematic and not working. We want to make sure that we're kind of mindful of the fact that maybe not everything sucks, maybe just this little part sucks, and maybe we need to tweak or change that rather than going to like a complete new planning system.
It's one of my favorite things to do actually with my weekly bullet journal spreads is going and looking at not just the information that's in there before I migrated, but actually kind of doing an audit of that weekly spread. Because I try to put like little modules of things inside of there often. And I'll go back and I'll say, okay, did this week spread work for me? And a lot of the things are what we just talked about. Like, did I miss tasks that were supposed to get done? And something like I've altered a little bit over time is, I used to do just like rapid looking, like the way that we learn in the very beginning. And what I've realized is that when I combine notes and task, even though I have these symbols like that tell me that something's a note or a task, for whatever reason, when it's in line with everything else, I just don't feel very productive about actually then accomplishing those things. So like something that I tweaked for myself personally was that I have a separate column for tasks and then a separate space for notes. And that is something that's helped me out. Again, sometimes it counters itself where I'm writing down notes, but there's an action and I'm like, okay, wait, the action goes over here, but it's kind of a part of the note. And so I've kind of altered a little bit of how I do it. But a real big thing for me though is really making sure I'm separating out where that different information goes so that I know it, especially when I start a new week. I think that's the big thing for me. If I'm migrating things from last week and bringing it over, I just have my task list and I'm just writing everything straight down that line, not trying to like connected to the note of the thing that it goes with. And that's just like a simple example of something I can change. Again, I like bullet journaling. Not all of it was working for me. I'm not going to just blow up my whole system just to make that work, because honestly, that was like a little tweak I had to make for myself. Do you have anything like that that you've done over time as well?
Yeah, for sure. When I first started, I like was kind of just mimicking what I saw online. So I kind of used a lot of the same structures month after month without a lot of thought as to whether they were actually working. I kind of, made myself fit my planner rather than my planner fitting my life. There did get to a point though where we had enough kind of inspiration in the community, I guess, to show that there are actually other different ways to do things. Not everything is boho berry. Shout outs to Moho Berry. She very much inspired my first journal setups. But looking back and looking at those kind of layouts and such, they did obviously work for me for a time, but they did get to a point where it's like something needs to be different here because this is a system that can work for me. It has shown like it has a track record of working, but there are some parts that just weren't so much. So, for instance, like the horizontal layout of a tracker, like, for instance, you'd have to turn your notebook in order to actually use it. That didn't work. Didn't love that. Didn't like the fact that the title wasn't like at the top of the page or something like that. Didn't like that I had to rotate my notebook to use it because it was just like a barrier to entry. So rather than saying, oh, well, I guess the bullet journaling isn't for me, I'm just going to throw that away, I just changed the structure of that tracker. Eventually, I found that monthly tracking also wasn't really for me either, so we put that onto the weeklies instead. So just changing the style of it, just changing like the I guess time period of it, so that then you can kind of have a smaller area of focus rather than the entire month. That was just really helpful for actually getting me in and using it rather than saying at the start, like, oh, well, I guess habit tracking isn't for me at all. I can't possibly do it because this one structure or this one layout doesn't work. So, like, okay, no, the layout doesn't work. Habit tracking in general, though, could work. We just need to do it differently.
Was that tracker that you were putting on the side, did it happen to be in a B5 size notebook?
No, that one was in an A5. It was like a rotated one, but since doing what? How did I do my trackers in a B5? I think that was the point where I was doing similar style It's just that it was vertically aligned. So when I first started, I would rotate the notebook, the habits would go down the kind of like essentially the bottom of the layout, and then you would count the numbers up from the bottom so that then when you had that horizontal view, it kind of made sense. Eventually, the style of monthly habit tracker that I actually got to work for me was similar in structure but vertically aligned. So you had the habits as icons or as written words along the top, and then numbers down the left hand side from like, 1 to 30 or whatever it was. So you'd effectively just have little boxes to color in for each of those. And I found that that vertical alignment did work really nicely. And in terms of monthly habit tracking, that was the best structure I found for me for quite a while. But eventually it was just like, yeah, you're getting to the mid month point every single month, and now you're just falling off with your trackers, especially when I would set up the next month. Like, as soon as I would set up the next month's, like, start of month pages, like, the cover page and the monthly log and all of that kind of stuff, it's like the current month just didn't exist. I'm like, nope, you don't spark joy anymore. Go away. I only want to use the new things. It was a bit of a problem.
Well, I asked that question because I feel like A5s and B5s, like A5 is its size and the width of it is only so much, right? And so that's why you likely turned it. And B5 I find to be like somewhat similar, even though there is more space. With it, you're just like, well, no, I have this more space, but you're like, but I have even more space if I turn it over here to the side and doing it that way. The size of the notebook and the layout of the notebook, I think, makes a really big difference on that too. So I just asked that question because I feel like everyone's been there at some point where you're like, I need extra space. Maybe I'll just turn my notebook. I mean, that's what I'm doing in my B5 right now. I do my calendar pages for my future log instead, and I couldn't get it to work. It works beautifully in a square notebook. I perfected it. It was great. Then I'm like, oh, B5 this time around. And then I think it actually might have been you. You were like, turn your notebook, Mark. I bet you that would work. And I was like, yeah, but it's kind of the same thing. I'm just like, okay, flip to the page. Okay, got to rotate my notebook now. And it's funny you say that about like where the header is. For whatever reason, I can't read sideways all the time. So I have to turn my notebook and then look at the month as I'm going up. It like, for whatever reason, I can just read it better that way. But it just makes a big difference though, on like even the size of your notebook with some of those layouts. And that's always a hard one. Trackers and like the wrong size, they don't make friends.
Yeah, I mean, size of notebook or size of planner in general can really have an impact because, for instance, if your planner or journal is too big to get out and put on your desk, you're probably not going to use it whenever you're at your desk. And if you do the like majority of your work at your desk, then it's like, cool, now I'm just neglecting my journal or planner. So maybe it's not the structure that is a problem, it's just the fact that like it doesn't work in the physical space that you're working in. So taking that kind of like problem solution, like a kind of problem solving mindset to it, acting as like an experimenter or a scientist. So trying to figure out like what in particular is actually wrong here and what can I do about it. So maybe instead of a B5 planner, I go with an A5 or a B6 or something. You need to obviously make sure you're balancing the like physical space taken up with actually writing things in there and having enough space to do your planning. But it is something that you can kind of apply and see if that will help you in terms of any woes that are keeping you from using your planner.
Yeah, something that's been really interesting for me over time. I was just, as I was resetting up my bookcase, I was looking through everything and I was looking through like my A5s because that's where I started. And then, I tried different sizes that I went along. And it was something that was so interesting, especially in the A5s. And this just brings us into our next point about knowing how like it might be trying to maybe switch things up, but not switch necessarily the method. I didn't, my A5 pages were like one page and somehow some of them weren't even all the way filled out. And I was looking back and I was like, Mark, how did you only need one page in an A5 for what you were doing in your bullet journal? Because like now I can't even imagine working inside of a smaller notebook because there's just a lot of notes and tasks and things that are going on in my life. And so I've, watched and kind of tracked because it was a thought that I had in my mind. And I was like, okay. And then I like looked as I moved up in space, especially into like a B5 or into a square notebook. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like, you don't need double pages, you only need single pages, or you need double pages because like a lot is going on. And then I started to find this theme of like almost seasonal approaches to work. And because I know that like I have them at work, like I know like we get very busy in the summer, like early spring, summer, and then it takes a little bit of a dip at the end. And then like we get towards like October, November, and then it like dips hardcore like in December. And something that I noticed also with that is I was changing the layouts that I needed because I was feeling as if I had all of this space and I wasn't using it. And then I was like, well, maybe this isn't the right thing for me. But then what I realized is that just the amount of space that I was using or the amount of pages that I was using wasn't right for me at that time. So something else to think about, this is kind of just what brought me into this, was just that maybe there's a seasonality that you haven't realized happens in your day to day or your work or whatever that is, where you don't need all of the things. You only need like a smaller space to kind of handle that. So instead of overloading yourself or trying to still do too much and then getting upset at yourself for not using it, not filling out the tracker, not doing those things, maybe it's just not a tracker season. Maybe it's time to just, nestle up and be free of that for a little bit and then come back to it when you're feeling better or you have the space or the time to try to accomplish those things. That could be something else that someone could try if you feel like it's not quite working out for you. But again, we don't want to say like force yourself into it. Like if it's not working, it's not working. But I always, again, trying to save all that money and time and space and energy that we talked about, trying to find options first before we make that decision to move away from it.
And I think that along with the kind of seasonality of it, what can also be at least tricky for me, I found, is the idea of like an annual planner. Like you buy your one planner or journal or whatnot for the year, and that's the one you use for the entire of the year. That one is always tricky because it's like, okay, typically they're more expensive because they are bigger. And then if you get to like, I don't know, if it's a January through December, you get to February and you're like, cool, this isn't working. You're like, great, do I just like bin it or recycle it? It's paper probably, but still, like that can be a really tough thing because time, effort, energy, like we've said, those resources that you've spent on it can feel wasted. But are we effectively throwing away the rest of a year on a system that's not actually working because we're trying to like cram our life into a planning system that doesn't actually work for us? That's kind of where my beef with it is, I suppose. But I also kind of, based on that feeling and based on that idea of like, oh god, I've got this like annual planner that now isn't going to work because I've realized that my life doesn't really work like this. That's why I do very much appreciate the existence of like 6 month planners or even quarterly planners or whatnot, especially if you're moving to something new or thinking about moving to something new. You can do that kind of like ooch or test run of it rather than going in and being like, cool, I'm a Hobonichi cousin kind of person now. I don't even know. Is the Hobonichi cousin an annual planner? She knows nothing. She's not a Hobonichi person. But it's like you jump in, buy this annual planner, and then realize 2 weeks in you're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. But if you had have done like an ooch or just tried it out for maybe a season or a quarter or a 6 month period or something, you could have saved yourself the heartache of buying an annual planner that went pretty much untouched.
Yeah, I think about that, especially when I'm talking about and talking with people about starting bullet journaling. It's not a month thing that you try and realize it doesn't work out for you. I think it is at least 3 to 4 months worth of doing and trying and learning and really trying to figure out, is this the right thing for me, before you're like, it's just not working out for me. And that's really important. You make a fantastic point there. Some of my favorite non-bullet journals or just planners, I guess, do that. We talked about like the night owl planner, for instance, right? Like Owl Paper, they do half a year, and then you can buy both notebooks for a full year or just one. And that's 6 months of time, for instance, that you're putting into that and figuring out, is this the right thing for me? And that way, when you get to the end, you don't feel as bad about that investment if you are like, no, this isn't right for me. So I'm curious, just like from your perspective, like what do you think is that right amount of time before you're making that jump to say, not working?
I think it very much depends on what thing you're trying out. Like, if you're trying out a monthly structure and you only give it a week, yeah, probably not like a sufficient amount of time because maybe that was the week from hell. Maybe that was the week where like everything went haywire. It was not like a good reflection of regular life for you. So, of course, trying to incorporate something new on that kind of period of time isn't really it's not gonna work out. It's not gonna happen. Whereas something like a weekly structure, if you give that a week and it doesn't really work, then possibly you'll have more of a better understanding as to whether that's going to be something that does work moving forward or not. So I think that whatever period of time the thing is supposed to be for, at least 2 at a minimum is probably my safest bet. Like if you use the same weekly structure 2 weeks in a row, and at the end of those 2 weeks, you're like, yeah, no, nothing got done. I am a scatterbrained mess. I am behind on all my deadlines, and my journal didn't help me at all. Then probably we will. Or at least I would make changes there. I would try something different. Similar idea for a monthly structure. If I try it for 2 months in a row and at the end of those 2 months I'm like, yeah, this did not fulfill the purpose that I gave for it, then I'd probably be looking for something different. it also kind of is like, do I need to change this in the form of like small tweaks, or like when we talked about before, that idea of rotate the tracker, or is it, do I need to change this in the sense of completely scrapping it because maybe I thought, I was like wishfully hoping that this was going to be something that I would use and would get value out of, but realistically I'm not. It's that idea of, when you set yourself a goal and you actually set it because you feel like you should want to do the thing rather than you actually want to do the thing. Sometimes layouts and planners end up like that, I feel. We put them in there because we feel like we should want to hydrate more and track our water rather than actually giving a toss as to how much water we intook during each day.
Yeah, it's one of those hard things to do. I think what makes it even harder is if it's a predated, or even if it's just a planner that already has the pages designed out for you, you are really dedicating yourself to those layouts. There was a notebook a number of years ago, and it's not coming to my mind right now, where you could kind of design it for yourself. Oh, Palette was the name of it. And so you could go onto their website and essentially you could design what you wanted your pages to look like. And then that way, when you got it, it was exactly what you needed. And I remember like really loving this idea at first. I didn't totally love the paper. That's the reason that I'm not using it. But it was a really cool modular way to approach it, because it was like, how do you like to take your weeks? Do you like a weekly view? Do you like to have space with just like grid layouts? Like, what does that look like? And I just remember just being like, this is it, because it's so hard to find a planner that you love, especially if it's already pre-made, right? That's why I love a blank notebook, because I can make it what I want. But there are times, especially when you're going through that and you're trying to see if a layout works for you, we're just doing the same thing over and over again. I think that's the misperception a lot of people get around bullet journaling or DIY planning, is like, well, God, you got to draw the same thing out every single week. I personally feel like if you are drawing the same thing every single week, there's probably a more efficient way to do that, making it yourself, or again, working with someone else on it, or just drawing it. You do your thing. Who am I to tell you what to do? But the idea there is that there becomes like an efficiency part of it. But yeah, when that efficiency part isn't working out for you, it does get hard. So I mean, that's my thing. Like you said, you're kind of, I like the idea of like, if it's a monthly thing, at least 2 months. If it's a weekly thing, at least 2 to 3 weeks to see if it's working. I think just as a planner or a notebook as a whole, or a method itself, I'm in that boat where I'm saying like 3 to 4 months, give it a quarter, because I really do feel like that's going to give you the most to really be like, okay, yes, this worked for me. No, this didn't work for me, or this fits my lifestyle. I think that's something else we haven't really kind of tapped on just yet, is like, I personally think that a planner or a system has to also match your lifestyle, not just you, again, trying to fit yourself into this planner box of something that already exists. If that's not how you like to work, or that's not how your life is generally organized, it also isn't going to work out for you. So it's like finding kind of that perfect little Cinderella moment of planner in person.
No, it's very much that idea of like, what is it, Goldilocks with the porridge? Like, this journal is too hot. Hot damn.
Mine usually is, this tastes like crap. I don't want to use this anymore. Throw it out. I'm going to go sleep in this bed over here because it has 160 GSM dot grit paper.
I guess that's also a thing. It's like, in thinking about why you might want to switch or what isn't working, it's also like, is it a systematic thing? Like, this is going to happen every single time I pick up this journal on every single page? Or is it more of like this one-off thing? So if we're thinking about it in terms of like DIY planning, bullet journal, that kind of a thing, is this a notebook I actually like? Does it give me the good feel when I use it? Does it have the right, quote, quote, right kind of paper? Is the, are the pens that I'm using actually going to work nicely in here? That kind of stuff. Or if we're thinking about a pre-printed planner, like, do I actually have enough space in the boxes that I have for each week? Do I have the right number of boxes? Like, is it broken down too small or too granular for me? Or is it kind of like, maybe the spaces are too large and I feel like I'm just wasting a lot of space and stuff like that? Because if there are things that are going to happen on every single page and there's not really a lot you can do to change it and it doesn't work, then probably you might want to jump ship and go find something else. But make sure that you take that information moving forward. Like, if I was moving into a pre-printed planner, there are certain things that I know about myself as a planner based on my experience that I would be looking for. I would be looking for that thicker paper because I like to use certain materials that are going to they're going to really test the paper out. I need to make sure it holds up because if there's ghosting and bleeding, I'm going to have a bad time. I know this about myself from past experience, though. I know that I prefer to have vertical layouts rather than horizontal. I know that I don't really like to have monthly trackers, but I do like them on a weekly. But I also know that I like to have about 10 things that I am tracking at any one point in time, because when I build out a routine, I like to make it very stepwise as opposed to like little box that says morning routine. I'm like, no, 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 no. We're gonna get out of bed at this time. We're gonna get to the exercise. We're gonna have a nutritious breakfast or like whatever. I like to be able to break it down in that way. I need the space to be able to do that. So if you're going to be jumping ship, if you're jumping to a new planet, make sure that you account for those things as opposed to just getting like the shiny object syndrome. Like, this is going to be the one that changes everything for me. I'm going to get my life together. And then you get in there and you're like, oh yeah, I don't like that. Why didn't I think about that before?
Have you had any examples, Jess, for like where that's happened to you? Like any specifics?
See, I guess the biggest one is just knowing that I don't like pre-printed planners because I like to have flexibility. So every time I've tried one out, I get into it. I'm like, where's my flexibility? I'm like, Jessica, it's a pre-printed planner. What were you expecting? But I think that one in particular was moving into or attempting to move into a teacher planner, knowing that I do actually still like to see the weekend, but it didn't have weekend spaces available. So I got in there and I'm like, oh, I'm sure I can make my peace with it. But if I had have kind of examined it with a bit more of a critical lens and been a little bit more honest with myself, I would have been like, yeah, okay, no, you do like to have the weekend there. Even if it's not teaching time, you're still doing teacher related activities at that time. So you want that space there to be able to record things. What about yourself?
Yeah, the biggest one that has made sense to me, there was an appointed task planner that I love every single thing about it. And I really did, but the paper just wasn't working for the materials that I wanted to use. And so I was so dedicated to making it work that I actually started to just write in pencil, which was weird for me, but I was kind of like changing myself for the planner. Now, I want to put this out there because I really, really do love Appointed. And I'm not saying it's not for everyone. It could be, but like the pens that you can use in there, you can use pens in there. Let me just throw that out there. But it just wasn't like the really inky, juicy ones. Definitely no fountain pens. Like it was kind of all of that. And also, we talked about like that moment in time. I was really big in getting into fountain pens. And so in my mind, I was like, I'm using fountain pens all the time. And I was just like, well, crap, they're not working inside this planner, but I really like the way that this is structured and how it's organized. And so it was. And then what I ended up doing, not taking our own advice, again, do as we say, not as we do. I ended up starting another bullet journal and also keeping that planner at the same time, because the other thing I didn't like is it didn't have a lot of extra pages for collections, and I'm a big collections person. And so it was like I was keeping my weeklies over here. At that point, I was also tracking my team's capacity inside of there. It was really doing all those things. And then all of my collection pages I was putting inside of my bullet journal. And I did that for about 3 months. And then I was losing my mind because I was opening the one to write things down. I was like, well, wait, then I had to go reference it over here. And it just got to be too much. It's like we talked about. It was like not enough room. I was trying to work out of two notebooks on my desk at a single time. It did not make sense. And so I did have to like finally like kind of just like put that to rest. I still have it. Again, I still love the idea of it. And I actually took a lot of inspiration from that into my bullet journal. It's actually what was the thing that got me to switch between using just a regular future log and creating a calendar future log, because I love that so much in that planner that I just brought it into. And now I just make my own calendars in the front of my notebooks. That takes a little bit of time, some practice, some research and development, but I figured it out. So it just took me a while to get there, but it was because I liked it so much, but it was just some lifestyle things that just they weren't making sense.
One change that I know that I made fairly, I'm not going to say early on, because it did take me a decent long while, was moving from that vertical monthly log that's in the kind of like original bullet journal method kind of thing to a just calendar layout. Because I don't know why I had it in my mind that I'm like, it's not a bullet journal if you don't use the vertical monthly log. Oh, how naive she was. Oh, sweet summer child. But eventually I'm just like, Your brain just works better with an actual calendar view. Just draw the calendar view. I don't know why it took me so long to just like kind of bite the bullet and actually do it. I'm glad I did though, because it did wonders for actually being more organized, getting to things when I needed to, keeping track of these appointments and such, because I'm not very good at writing multiple things, because I'd always have multiple things on one day, and then trying to write multiple things on one line. Ugh. No, 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 no. Doesn't work good for my brain. I just needed something that had like a little box to say, oh, look, this is Monday. These are the things that are happening. Worked much better.
I'm 1 bazillion% there with you. I think the reason that we are all so much like that is because when you do start with the bullet journal method, it is really ingrained in you that you have to follow that method. And again, I throw this out there, it's not baiting you, Jess. But the idea is, though, that you have to learn the method before you start to break the rules. At least that's how I like to look at it. So you have to try it that way to see if it works for you. But you do have to come to a point there where you have to say, and you have to understand it is okay to change parts of that method for what you need. Because I did the same exact thing that you did for so long. I could open up all my notebooks when I first started. You would see them not really used because of that exact reason. I need to write multiple things. If it's someone's birthday and I also have a doctor's appointment on that day, that will not fit on a little A5 size line. I'm not going to abbreviate every word to try to make it fit. And I was just like, why isn't this working for me? This isn't working for me. I need a different approach. So it's so funny to hear you say that, because for a really, really long time, I stuck with it because I thought that I had to, until I just gave myself the permission to be like, Mark, this isn't working for you. Change it. And it was the same exact thing. And then once I did that, I never created another monthly blog page ever again, because I just realized it wasn't the right thing for me. And so I just completely deleted that part out of my method.
I think that permission is a big thing as well, because we have a lot of people in the community who, they'll jump into the Facebook groups or the Discord servers or anything like that, and they're like, oh, do you think I can? Am I allowed to? Would it be okay if? I'm gonna just say that if it is your planner and your planner system and your journal, you have blanket permission. Totally fine. If you want to draw in there with a watercolor pencil, go forth. If you want to, I don't know, engrave your things onto a stone and use that as your like tabernacle for the day of things that you need to get done, more power to you. I don't have that kind of patience. At the end of the day, what I care about is that you enjoy using it and you're actually using it. So if it's doing the thing you have like assigned to it, if it has fulfilled the purpose you have given to it, props to you. Yay. Even if it doesn't look like ours, even if it doesn't look like somebody else's method, as long as it's working for you and it's bringing joy, it's a good one. If that means you need to change into a different planner system to do that, you again have full permission. Like, if we think about it in terms of that kind of sunk cost fallacy, it's like, oh, I spent money on this and I've already spent time on this. You can't get that back, but you can at least get back the time that you would spend in future, just like forcing yourself to do it. You can get back the joy that you would not be able to feel because you're trying to force yourself into a system that doesn't actually really work for you. So, in that kind of like space of things, if you switch now, then you will have more joy to spend in future and more time, effort, and energy to spend on other things because you're not like soul sucking yourself trying to work in a system that just doesn't work for you.
And I think a really big point, just to add on top of that, is that if it doesn't work out for you, it does not mean that you are a failure. It does not mean that like you couldn't make it work. It's just that it really wasn't right for you. And something you can do again to try to overcome that cost failure part is don't throw away that notebook. Now, if it is giving you hell and you hate it every second of it, you burn that sucker outside in the fire pit, right? Like we don't have to hold on to things like that if it gives you that type of anxiety. But sometimes you can find future uses for those things. There's a number of those type of planners that I have. I actually think Hobonichis are probably the most used for this, especially in like the fountain pen ink space, where people are like, I'm going to use this. It's going to change my life. And then they get into it and they're like, not really for me. That actually has really nice paper in it. And so a lot of people will go ahead and start doing ink swatches inside of there, or even like using the calendar pages for like different things that they want to do with pens or ink or drawings or doodles or whatever it is. You can give life to partially used notebooks. I have several of them on my shelf that I will just open up and be like, you know what? Today I'm doing some ink swatches inside of here. I haven't used this notebook in a while. And it's fine. It's paper. I'm not going to throw it away. I'm still using it. It's maybe not as functional necessarily as it was intended to do, but I'm still giving it a second life. And now now, again, it takes a little bit to get here. We both are saying this to you after years of experience. So if you're the person who's just getting into notebooks and journals and different type of planners now, we're telling you, your future self would tell you, you're not failing at it. It just didn't really work out for you. You gave it a good try. You did everything you could to make it work. It just wasn't the right thing for right now. And that's absolutely 100% okay.
I very much agree. And I definitely think we're going to have a future episode about like those half used journals, notebooks, planners, and such that we kind of realized weren't really for us, maybe not for that season or not at all. But we'd love to ask you, Planner Pals, have you ever made a switch in your planner? Have you jumped planners to a completely different one? Have you made tweaks or changes? What kind of things prompted you to get to that point? What were the deciding factors that made you decide, yeah, okay, it's time to make a change? Let us know either in the comments here on YouTube, or you can hit us up at Instagram at Planner Pals Podcast, or you can hit us up on email at plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com.
You got them all, Jess. Good job.
I'm like, did I? I'm like, I can't remember. We haven't done this for a while. It's been a while.
Our next episode is going to be so fun. It actually kind of piggybacks perfectly. It's almost as if we planned this. We're going to be talking about planner peace versus planner chaos and the ability to live in both, or one or the other, and it being totally okay. So it's going to be a super fun episode. I can't wait to chat with you all about that next time. Jess, thank you so much for another fantastic conversation today. I think this topic was very good. I feel like at this time and moment in the world, we also needed some of this positive affirmation in a world of not always getting positive affirmation, especially on the internets.
Yes, we want this to be a positive space, and we very much value having you here, Planner Pals. As always, thanks for watching, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.